it's done in different ways. And so what most people like to say is the science work is translated into useful things. But really what I like to say is you're putting that knowledge to work. And so I'll use the example of the science that I do. I work on fungal diseases of vegetables, and I explore why the fungus attacks the plant, how the plant reacts, what was the role of the environment. But then when it's time to actually put that to use, I'm working with farmers on how to stop the fungus, what was the environmental conditions that propelled the fungus to attack your plants, and what can we do to somehow break the cycle. And so again, it's using all that information from the biology that you studied and then putting it to work in answering the questions that need to be addressed. I think the farmers have a major role, and all of our stakeholders in cooperative extension have a major role, because what we don't want to be is what I call information giver-outers. But we want to have dialogue. We want to be conversing with people, and it should be a two-way interaction at all times. And so in some roles, I go out and I am providing a lot of information and answers, but I'm also listening very carefully to how that individual or that community wants to use what I gave them, because they may have a totally different approach. But the other thing as a scientist is that I find when I converse with those farmers and with other people, they are often bringing new issues for me to study. They're saying to me, I saw this, that, or the other. Do you think that it could be a true relationship, or do you think that this is what's happening? A very good example was a farmer that said to me, I have this fungal problem, but you know, at the same time I also have this flea beetle problem in my cabbage fields, and I think they're linked. And I said to him, it's not impossible, let's go out and have a look. And we did a study for a couple of years, and there was clearly a link between those two organisms, between that fungus and the flea beetle. And as it turned out, the flea beetle was hopping around on different cabbage plants and spreading the fungus around. And he also found that those fungal spores were rather irritating, and so he'd kind of scratch and itch. And when he did that, he'd spread some more fungal spores around. And so it was really interesting, because that flea beetle, when you looked underneath the microscope, was just covered with spores. And so definitely it had a role in spreading that fungus around. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't had that conversation with the farmer. And so I think it's really, really, really important to just go and visit and talk, and just work very closely with people. And that two-way interaction is really the key to success in getting that science out there as part of your extension program. I think one really overarching skill is organization. You have to be able to organize your thoughts, organize your data, organize your experiments to be a scientist. And so in some ways, when I look back, I was probably a little bit of a neatnik. I kind of kept a clean room, and I had books on the shelves kind of categorized, and so I would have to say that there were probably some early warning signs that I was heading down this path. But I think that one of the things that a scientist has to be is organized, because in your scientific world, your colleagues will always question, well, did you do this? Did you record that? How do you know this is true? Was the data replicated, etc.? And so I think it's really important that you always have a very neat and tidy protocols, that you've written everything down that you did, so that any other scientist can go back and repeat your work and get it done. So I think that's a really critical thing that you need to have. Some people have always said, well, you have to be very quantitative. I think that depends on what science you do. And now with so many computer tools, it's not like you have to sit down with your slide rule and calculate out stuff yourself. There are programs where you can get your statistical analyses done, but you have to have an understanding of why you're analyzing something the way you are. So I think it's really good that you have good inquiry, good critical analysis skills, and extremely good organization. I would say it's really important to have that informal education for two reasons. One is that when it's really well done, informal education, people don't even realize that they've been educated. And I think a lot of times we feel like, somebody has to sit down into a classroom setting and that's education. But a real hands-on activity that sends the light bulb off and gets people really thinking is an absolute treasure. A good example that I've seen that cooperative extension people do, Joe LaQuatra has a bicycle that is hooked up and wired up to these different kinds of light bulbs and different products, and you have to pedal that bicycle and turn that product on. And so, for years people have said, oh, the incandescent light takes a lot of energy to run, and it didn't mean a thing to me. So Joe put me on the bicycle, I pedaled that bike, and I thought, good heavens, this is kind of hard. And then he put me on the bicycle with one of those other light bulbs that are more energy efficient, and I didn't have to pedal nearly as hard. And I realized if you put that over the lifetime of your light bulbs and you look at your entire house, that's a lot of energy that you could be saving with very little effort. All you have to do is replace the light bulbs. And so I think there again, I learned a lot. It was not in a classroom setting, it was on a bicycle. And so, Extension has very creative ways to help us see and realize what they're trying to teach and grasp the entire message. And so I think that it's just a beautiful system, the way that we work with people and how we do what we do. You don't have to be certified to be a scientist. I think that citizens have a crucial role in science, and I think that we've seen that a lot with the people that are really into birds. And when you look at the Cornell Lab of O and they do the big backyard bird count, those are all just regular folks that are helping them document the birds. And I think it's really critical, some of the work that they've done and what they've discovered and how they've been able to track illnesses in different species of birds, and they know which ones have high populations in a certain year, which ones are low. They can go out and figure out why. And so I think citizens have a very, very important role in terms of helping to document things. Citizens are even documenting changes that they see in their own backyards in terms of flowering dates on perennials and first date of emergence for your bulbs and things like that. And that's also helping us to document whether or not we're really seeing a global warming or a climate change. And again, those are everyday citizens just writing things down on paper. And a lot of people are doing it with, what's the purple flower? Lilacs. Because they're saying that this year, if you look at the Lilac Festival in Rochester, they're having trouble now because flowers are blooming earlier and their festival has a set date. And so they've always done it the third week of whatever or the second week of whatever, and they need to move it up. Well, I think you can trust science, and you have to say that the people that come out with their statements are using the best tools that they have available. And so, for instance, there were statements that came out that said don't eat eggs because they have too much cholesterol. Well, they do have the cholesterol, but what they've, after further inquiry, have discovered is that the cholesterol that you're taking in from those eggs isn't necessarily the problem. It's that you could be manufacturing your own cholesterol, and that could be the problem. And so there's a lot of things that a scientist can come out and say, and that it might get disputed. And again, I don't think it's vicious wrongdoings. It's just that new tools have come out that give us a better answer. And so I think we'll always see this discourse that goes back and forth, where it looks like science changed its mind, or that somebody challenged somebody else's theories. But I think that's just good, strong inquiry, and people really trying to get down to really drill down to the bottom and get to the facts. And so those kinds of things will always be there. But I think you can still trust the scientists.